What's up, YouTube? So we're here for the next part of our Dragon Turtle painting video, and we work on the head today. So we'll get this set up and we can start painting. Be right back. So we're going to start with painting our pale green again. Still have some on the wet palette. And this time we're going to paint a little bit differently, because we have some very large plates to work with for the head that don't even require an undershade of the pale green. So we're just painting this area here. Ah, dang it. I did forget something. I have some small areas that are unprimed, so let's prime them real quick. So, with the nature of my old wet palette, I couldn't do this, but with this one it works a lot better, so I can. One of the benefits of a wet palette is you can store this paint for later, and because it's got the access to the water from the wet palette, it's going to keep it where the paint is wet and usable. Now there are certain paints you cannot use with a wet palette because they will just seep through your paper. For example, a paint that's actually a wash or an ink, and when they seep through the paper, they'll get into your sponge, and that'll mess with future paints. So that covers our unprimed area. So while we wait for that primer to dry, let's paint in an area that was primed really well. So we're kind of just going to keep at this for a bit. While we wait for that to dry, we can go ahead and start basing down our layer up here with our black green. So pretty much we're gonna switch back and forth between getting our black green base coat down on these very large raised shell area, well, skin areas, and our pale green on the areas that we're going to come back and dry brush. And then as far as like our primed areas back here that are going to be hidden, just so we have a nice transition into the miniature in case any of that's where you can kind of peek at it, we'll just continue whatever color is beside it, and that will give it to where only what color should be there would leak through. Okay, so I will be back with that. So now that we have painted that, we're going to go in and do our dry brushing. We're going to do this much the same way we did it before. Just hitting the areas, getting those raised edges, applying more paint to the brush as needed. Enough color for me. That looks better. Now for the same thing on the other side. There we go. That looks good. Now, with our forest green again, we're going to take this and we're going to glaze in these raised edges. But this time I want to get a really strong, so where before I was just trying to lightly tint it up, this time I want to get a really strong tinting. So it's going to take a lot more layers to do that. And then once I get the strength of that up there, I'll blend it all back in with some glazes of the black green. So we'll just keep going back and add more layers like this as they dry until I get that full effect. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure I hit everywhere to deal with this, and we'll be back with the results from that in the next step. So I've zoomed in hopes that y'all can really see this. So we've got nice strong greens here, but this is not where I want to stop. From the forest green, I want to go to a grass green. Because I want to get a lot of piped. That is not shaking up good enough. I want to pip out a lot of detail on this, and like I said, I'm going to glaze it back over with the dark green. So it's going to have the dark green tints to it, but this is going to make it so that that dark green really shows a lot of detail. Now for this one, we're not going to hit as much as we did with the previous. We want that layer to be a lot wider, kind of like how we've done with the claws. And we're not going to do as many layers of this paint. Because we really just want the subtlest of tints. We don't want a very strong tint like what we did with the forest green. I am not staying in camera that well. So my hope is for 1 or 2 layers to be enough. So let's let that dry. Now we'll be back. When we look at when it dries, I may, just depending on how this looks, I may use this jade green here to add just some final spots that I want to really pick out. Like the hard edge going down. But other than that, As long as that transfers in really well, we don't have to do any additional layers. Then we'll move on to glazing it down with the dark green, and then y'all see kind of how that new transition looks. Okay, be right back. Okay, we're back, and just along this frontmost edge, we're going to take this jade green here, and we're going to add inline extra of detail. And that's what we got. So we will let that dry, and then we will start doing our glazes of the dark green to blend everything in together. And I'll let y'all see how that looks. So I've added more black green to the palette. And you're going to draw this out and get it nice and thin. We want really thin glaze for this. And try to get this where y'all can see me doing it. You're just going to lightly paint this over. And as you do so, it should leave the detail that we have painted in with the other colors, but this should just blend those colors in to make them more complementary to this black green. And kind of the end goal is to make it seem like we didn't really use much of many different paints at all, that we just got a nice easy shift. So just remember, keep the layers very, very thin. If you want all that detail that you've just worked really hard on to kind of bleed through, you just want it to blend. So I'm going to go back and do that. This may take a while and quite a few layers, and I will come back and show you the result, and then we'll move on to the next step. So you may not be able to see that well in the video, but there should be nice subtle shifts in the colors, which is kind of what we got. Now we're going to move on to painting down here. So we are going to use our stained ivory there it is, our creamy ivory to paint this. So putting the, wait no, shake it up first, don't make that mistake. Let's go and zoom out because we don't need this. So we're just going to go in, apply this, very carefully to the whole area. And it may take some layers, but we need to get a nice clean coverage of the color on the whole section of the Mini. So I'm just going to keep applying this till we get a nice clean coverage, and I'll be back. So now that we got a nice clean coat, we're just going to come in and do some highlights with our creamy ivory. And as you can see, we're just kind of picking out these edges very carefully. I'm just going to kind of pick some spots to highlight, to kind of show the detailed curves of the jaw. And all of these details, kind of like how we did on the top, we're going to blend them in with the glaze of the previous color. So we're going to let that dry, and then we'll glaze it in with the stained ivory. So we're back. So like before, we're just gonna draw this out, get nice and thin, and glaze it over, which we are running out of stained ivory. And I'm losing space to pull there, so we'll put it here instead. Try to have it where y'all can see. So really thin, you want to still be able to kind of see what's underneath. And you're kind of just going to go back and forth until you get a nice gentle transition. So I'll be back after this with the next step. So, not fully getting the result I'm wanting here. It's not working as great with these surfaces. So I'm going to try something that I have the knowledge of how it works, but not very familiar with doing personally. And it's called wet blending. It is blending on the miniature while both paints are still wet. So I'm going to paint the first color in and then blend it in with the second color on the miniature. This helps get nice, smooth transitions, and while I've still got kind of this excess color up here, let's kind of go ahead and extend some of that down here to the bottom. So we're going to try some going back and forth with this, see if we can get kind of what we're looking for. I'll be back. So that gave us what I wanted. So we're now going to go in and we're going to paint the eyes. And I'm starting with this ghost white instead of the usual white. This is a white with a little bit of blue to it. It'll give us an effect that's a little more kind of what you would expect for a creature these colors. So I'm gonna have to hold this really close to myself, so let's get it kind of adjusted. So we're gonna go very carefully into the eye. Do the same thing on this side. So I'm going to let that dry, hit it with any additional layers I need to hit it with, and then we will go ahead and come back with the next color. Okay, so we're back. So I have switched to a round brush, and I just put some of this Templar blue down. And we're going to go very carefully and paint a circle, and we want it to kind of look like he's looking forward. Okay. Now, to add a bit of that glowing factor that you see in a lot of Dragonites, we're going to do this Ashen Blue. Right. Just creating a small little ring. In the back and front. And anywhere where it got over a little bit too much into our regular, we can just fill back in. With a Templar blue. I think I just picked up the wrong blue. So we'll let that dry and I'll get ready for the next step. So we're back. So I have some pure black right here, and very carefully I'm going to draw a line to have this as a nice slitted eye, kind of like a cat's eye. And that. And then the last step, we're going to go back to our white and we're going to put a small little glimmer point at the top edge of black. Okay, that looks good. So let me hold this and zoom it in for y'all so y'all can kind of see what I did really good. So as you can see, there's a nice little ring of the lighter blue on the outside. Oh, come on, focus please. The lighter blue on the outside, the darker blue on the inside, and have that little speck of white over the black. So, I see some small points where my rubbing has kind of cleared off some of the paint. So we're going to go ahead and clean that up, and then we're going to go ahead and seal everything on the outside before we start working on the inside of the mouth. That way we don't rub off any of that, because that's going to be a very aggressive moving around a lot. Okay? What's up? We're back. So now we're going to start painting the inside of the mouth, and we are going to start with a violet shadow. And we want to, I've got it over here because I do not want this to even remotely get thin down. And we're just going to paint this in to the entirety of the opening in the mouth. And because we're not letting this thin down any at all, we're going to have to let this dry a bit longer than our usual coats. So I'm going to go get this nice good coat and then we'll come back with the next step. Okay, we got violet light now, and we are going to very carefully paint this onto these little raised edges. That is not working well. As well as the tongue itself and the little connecting piece for the tongue. That's good enough to start. So very carefully. Ah, son of a gun. That's gonna have to wait for a second. I see a spot that was messed with the. Okay, now let's try this again. Very carefully. Now we're going to paint the actual tongue itself. So I'm going to keep doing this and I'll come back with the results and then let you see the last and final step on it. So we're going to finish our highlights on the tongue and mouth with this sunset purple. Now this little flap that holds down the tongue, we're going to paint the entirety of that sunset purple. And then we're just going to pick out a few small areas, give a few little highlight lines everywhere else. And I got a little spot right here that I'm going to touch up. Okay. Now we're going to go back to our ashen blue. I want a little point of this right on the tip. Okay. So let's take this, move this around, and let's take this off of the stand and see if I can give y'all a better look at the inside of this mouth. So, I'm going to go ahead and put the video on pause right here. And we are going to let that dry, and then we can seal everything inside the mouth and glue this piece on. And then y'all will be able to see the turtle itself finished. But we still have the base to do. So, be right back. Okay, I'm back, and I give you a completed dragon turtle. So this has been a monster of a challenge to complete. And we're still not even done with the project yet, just done with the turtle himself. So, our next video will be covering painting the base here. And then we will do one more where y'all will get to see him propped up on the base, fully assembled. And in that one, we will cover the paints that we used throughout this whole project. Going to be quite a large list from what it's looking like. But yeah. Thanks for staying with us through this whole long project. I'll see y'all next time.